and this is where the latest book comes in, Close Encounters of the Flip Side Kind, because on some of these councils, there's people who don't look like they aren't
Mm-hmm.
human.
Right.
They're from other places. And so, at first it was interesting because a person would see a person on their council and go, this is creepy. This looks like, fill in the blank. Looks like an alien. Looks like a
Mm-hmm.
lizard. Looks like a bot, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I then say, all right, well, it's a mental construct. So there's nothing to fear. Now, that was interesting. Sometimes things happen. They don't want me talking about stuff.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But it is a mental construct. So there's nothing to fear from talking to an alien, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, they're on a council and they represent serving.
Yeah.
So you're asking a wise being, what are you doing here? And then they can recount it. And I've asked the question, so has a person I'm talking to ever been on your planet that you're from? And often they say, yes, we're friends. We've incarnated together. And then I'll say, can you show this person that journey, that lifetime? And the person I'm talking to suddenly is looking into off to the side and saying, oh, okay, I'm seeing a planet. It looks like this. And I ask the same questions I'd ask everybody. So what do you do there? What's your occupation? Do you have an occupation? Do you have a family? Do you have a place you live? And by gathering all of those reports, it takes me back to when I finished Flipside. I was invited to the University of Virginia, their Department of Perceptual Studies lab,
Mm.
run by Dr. Grayson, Dr. Tucker, and Dr. Kelly, and other people. These are all scientists dealing with how consciousness isn't confined to the brain.
Yeah.
And Grayson did near-death studies for a long, long time, and they invited me there. They wanted to see Flipside, and they wanted to talk about why hypnosis isn't really a valid scientific tool. But as I pointed out, that doesn't account for the consistent hallmarks that people say. So thousands of people say the same things,
Yeah.
even
Right.
though they're from different religions, and it mirrors the near-death experience. But the reason I brought this up is because Dr. Grayson said you can get objective data out of subjective experiences. So it's like talking to somebody who had a dream. It's a subjective experience. And you can't really say, okay, well, everybody will do, but you can say, oh, I talked to 100 people and they had this experience and this is what occurred. And that's why in near death studies, we learn, for example, 70% of people who have a near death experience something, 30% do not.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean something didn't happen, they just don't recall it.
Yeah.
And then you have the statistic that 1% to 3% remember something negative, they initially.
Yeah.
And those statistics are something that we can hang on to talk about, to write about, to say, well, in the book Divine Counsels, I had 20 scientists, a guy from Harvard, doctor, a priest, different people, different backgrounds, all professionals. The only thing they had in common was that they had done guided meditation before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did my little simple, I call it, it's a meditation, which I call Picture Yourself in a Boat on a River, from the Beatles song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Because everybody has heard it.
Yeah.
And so, imagine yourself in a boat on a river. And then that becomes a way, an avenue, a key. Once they can do that, do a guided meditation, then I can ask them, like, where do you want to go? Let's see if we can go and talk to people. And like I say, in the 20 people that I worked with in that book, none of them had ever heard of me. None of them had read any of my work. One guy had looked me up online before we did this Zoom session. But all of them, and I thought it would only be a percentage. I thought maybe 70% would. All of them were able to not only talk to a guide and learn new information, but all of them were able to visit a council and interview those people as to what they're doing in their lives. And none of them had ever heard of a council before. You see? So it's this idea of we can examine these things, we can. And so the latest book is really more about that form of communication. So I'm asking somebody I'm not seeing a question that somebody else is seeing, and I'm saying, would you put the answer in their mind? And the answer goes into their head, and they say what it is. And then, as subjective experience, I gather all of those reports, and they become data.
So I'm clear.
That's it.
You're speaking to something non-physical and saying, this person that's in front of me under hypnosis.
Not hypnosis, guided meditation.
Okay, guided meditation.
Anybody can do it. It's just
and you're basically requesting them to show something to your guided
person
meditation.
I'm talking to.
Yeah, right.
So, for example, I'm talking to you, right?
Yep.
And we could go and do that live on the air if you wanted to.
That's interesting because I've done a lot of guided meditation and some attempts at hypnosis and past life recall sort of exercises, and I can't say I've ever had an experience where I'm like, oh wow, definitively I know I was this in a past life or that. It's always felt a little bit like, okay, they're prompting me to give them some information that I need to make something up, and I know some people are more susceptible than others to,
Yeah.
Now, I have had experiences unprompted, like the dream I mentioned to you, before we started recording, that just was like, wow, information coming through the veil and becoming very meaningful on the side of the veil. But I wasn't seeking it. You know what I mean? I was sleeping, and then boom, there it is.
Well, here's what I think is going on in terms of the research and data. As Dr. Grayson points out in his book After, we have filters on the brain that block information that's not conducive to survival. And those filters disappear with dementia. As people are just about to pass, suddenly they recover.
They always
their
see their dead relative like clockwork.
Yeah. But then we also know children that don't have those filters until about the age of 8. Yeah. Where they see relatives or they remember past lives or whatever that is.
Yep.
However, and then as we know, near-death experience, it's like bypassing the filters. Out-of-body experience, clearly, somebody, a guided meditation or a meditation, somebody's traveling around to other realms, and you focus on the new information. So Dr. Alexander, when he had his near-death experience, the Proof of Heaven book, when he was
I had him on the
around,
show a couple times.
Oh, very good. And, a terrific guy. And, what's interesting about his experience was that he met a sister that he didn't know he had. This person who was guiding him around the flip side, he recognized as somebody that he knew, but he didn't know how. And then after he recovered, the family that put him up for adoption, his birth family, showed him a picture of his sister he had never met. And there she was. So it's new information,
right,
that he experienced while he was doing it. So that's what I try to focus on. And there is there is that construct of well, it's a dream. I'm in a dream. Is this real? Is this not real? And how real is it? I'll give you an example. I was writing about it today on Quora. We've got this forum called Hacking the Afterlife. And somebody was asking, why is it when people report ghosts and stuff, they're, hanging around? I thought everybody got greeted by people on the other side. Why didn't they just go home? Like is what people say.
Yeah.
And I try to point out, well, it's optional.
Yeah.
You can hang around if you really want to.